Okay, so Marlene, you've spoken to us about how trauma underpins so many biopsychosocial manifestations of illness in a person. I wonder if you could perhaps for the students define what sexual health is. So what does that actually mean? What are we comparing the disorder to?
Right. So sexual health, we look to the reference for the students is to go to WHO, because they are the ones who created the definition of that, which is still a working definition actually. And what sexual health is defined as is it's not just an absence of a disease. When we talk about sexual health, we're looking at your right to have health. What does the health mean? That you have safe sexuality, that you're free of violence, you're free of coercion. There is consent in your sexual activity that you do, that you're not forced into any kind of child marriage or any kind of genital mutilation. And as I always say to the students, you really have to be aware of your geopolitical, socioeconomic factors in your patient's life, the patient who's sitting in front of you. So now, most recently, there has been a banning in, I think it was Sudan, just been announced, banning of criminalizing of anyone who performs any kind of female genital mutilation.
Okay.
So you want to know that, because you want as a student to be able to also inform. It's part of your responsibility to be able to give education and information to your patients. So you want to be able to know this is criminalized, and this is something which you have a right in terms of your health not to have genital mutilation. You have a right to object. I mean, it's kind of messy, Siobhan, because there are many other implications involved, and I don't want to get into that, because a woman who doesn't have genital mutilation, she may be never married off. So, you know, there are lots of implications that we don't want, but the students do need to know about that. The right to termination, the right to reproductive health, the right to have the relationships of your choice. That's what sexual health is about. And the big piece that we're all looking at now in the world of sexuality is the right to pleasure. There is a whole body of work. In fact, what's just happened, let me just take a step back, is that there's an organization called the World Association of Sexual Health. And I really encourage all of the students, if you're interested in sexual health, to join our organization. You can join for free as a member, as a student. And what we do is that we have webinars. Every single month, we hold a different webinar around sexual health and sexual rights. And we hold meetings every 2 years. Last year, the meeting was held, the Congress was held in Mexico, and they created a Declaration of Rights to Sexual Pleasure. So this is like, yeah, it's a big thing. It falls under human rights. Now, WAS, the World Association of Sexual Health, we are part of WHO. WHO is the United Nations. So this is going to be ratified. What we're busy doing right now, and I'm an author on one paper where we're looking at pleasure as a right for every single person. And when we say every person, this is something I really want to focus on with the students. Let's kind of pretend we're in the classroom and pretend that you've got this patient in front of you, because one of the most important things when you do a sexual history is that you have to have, first of all, respect for the person who's in front of you, respect for the diversity, respect for the fact that you may feel uncomfortable and they may feel uncomfortable with whatever you're going to be asking or you're going to be putting in front of them. Confidentiality has to be there. Mm-hmm. So I always give the example of saying, if a man comes to you and he's got genital warts and you're a general practitioner, you really want to be clear around confidentiality, that you don't tell his wife who comes in with his children the next time, because he may be on the down low. He may be a man who's having sex with other men once a week or 3 times a month or something. So you really want to be very clear around confidentiality around your patients. And then we want to return to the non-judgmental piece of it. And what non-judgmental means that we have to kind of hold our breath and be very clear that this person's sexuality or what they're indulging in or finding pleasure in is completely different to what we may find morally, ethically, culturally appropriate. And we still have an obligation as healthcare providers to be able to be present with that. An example that I give is that of the termination, the act on termination of pregnancy. When it first came out, there was real difficulty. This came out in 1996, and there were real difficulties with doctors and with nurses because they felt morally, culturally opposed to abortion. And the law had to adjust to be able to accommodate the right of people, healthcare providers, to say, no, I'm respecting my right to say no. And what they included then was that you have to do a referral. And that's the obligation that we all have. If we're not comfortable with it, we have to refer on. So that's always a difficulty, is not judging your patient who's in front of you, not making assumptions. So I'll come back to the pleasure, but I do want to really focus on this point of not making assumptions. And I always use myself as an example that, you know, I walk in and I'm the new face, just like the patient would be a new face in the room. And they look me up and down, and they've already made huge amounts of assumptions about me. So the thing they can't assume, of course, is that I'm white. Can't help that. That is what I am. And this is all to do with diagnosis and how do I make a good diagnosis. And if I'm going to make assumptions about the patient in front of me, I'm not going to be able to make a good diagnosis, which is why we have to be present in an uncomfortable way to do a sexual history take as well. So your patient, what do you see about me? Oh, you know, they assume that I am because of my age, I am a typical monoheteronormative woman. How do you know that? Well, you know, look at the way that you dress, and look at, you know, I look as if I am middle upper income group. I look as if and then they get a little confused because I don't wear a wedding ring. And then I say to them, but hey, you know, I wear a necklace. Maybe I belong to somebody. I'm a slave. You kind of got to provoke and get them to think a little out the box so that there isn't just the assumption, wedding ring. So therefore, if this woman is not married, she's not having sex. I don't have to do a sexual history take with her because only married people have sex. So it's kind of getting down to the essence of really being present with that person, your patient, and not knowing anything and not making any assumptions. Am I a woman? Well, I take on the outward role of a woman. I dress because I choose to in a feminine way, but am I really a woman? And then we get into, well, maybe I am a trans woman, and maybe I'm here to have a prostate examination. And how are you going to feel about that? You've kind of dismissed that completely because I appear as a woman. And then the students will say, well, then do we ask every patient, are you a male or a female? It's like, no, we don't do that. But there are ways of being able to give the patient the right to disclose what their identity is. And it's a simple thing like saying, how do I call you? Tell me what name I should call you. So I could say, well, you know, should call me Mark. And I'm always going to give examples to the students. So I'm going to keep doing that. I've got a client right now, and I don't call them patients because they're not sick. They're people who are in distress, and so they're clients. And because I'm working only online, my client appeared on my screen, and I could not make out the gender of this person. This person had very, very long hair, and this person had makeup on, and yet she called herself by a male name. So on the appointment, there was a male name, and they popped up an image which didn't fit with the name. So I sit with this, and I am waiting for this person to identify themselves. And is it really necessary? Not really. And I'll say, how would you like me to call you? He, she, it, they, or your name? And she says, I like my name. You can call me by my name. And I am a trans woman. Okay. So already I now kind of know where I am, and I still don't know because I'm still wanting to find it. And what her presenting issue is with me is that she has changed her hormones. She was on testosterone suppressing hormones and had lost all of her libido completely. And her penis obviously had really shrunk, but had really become quite atrophied. And now she has changed to just estrogen hormones, and finds that her libido is enormous, but her pleasure is diminished. So she's got an atrophied penis, which is like a very enlarged clitoris, and she has now diminished pleasure, even though she's got a very high libido. And if I were just to listen to that, if I was just working in sexual medicine, and this is a real warning for the students, you would immediately just go into the biological part of it and the pharmacological part of the assessment, and maybe just look at, moving or adjusting her hormones or something. Or maybe you think of giving her a testosterone patch or something to increase her libido or her pleasure. But we don't do that. We move along from the bio, psycho, social, and I always include relational and pharmacological elements. What else is she taking? Is she drinking too much? Is she taking too many drugs? Other recreational drugs? And I'll come back to that because that's a huge thing right now. A huge thing. Psychedelic drugs. Don't assume that your patients are not eating edibles. I just read an article this morning around one of the most popular items that have been bought now in Western countries is edible marijuana during this time of COVID-19. So don't assume that they're not taking. You have to inquire whether they are taking anything or how much alcohol or tobacco or marijuana or over the counter, and I'll come back to that. So we have to do that. So psychologically, it's not about her pleasure. On the second session that we had, it's not about her pleasure. It's about her trauma. It's about her she has become agoraphobic, isolated, depressed, and anxious because she works from home. She works in IT, so she's quite isolated, even though she's engaging with colleagues. But the minute she walks out of her apartment, people are looking at her funny. She's 49 and she only transitioned 4 years ago. People look at her funny. She talks about the pain of seeing friends. She used to be an athlete, an international athlete, actually. And people from those days look at her and they don't invite her out and they don't know what to do with her. And she is suffering so much because of that. Now, this has not got to do with her hormones. She's in control of her hormones. The pleasure is secondary. That's a presenting problem. You can't just sit with that and medicate that away. You have to be able to go a little more into the psychological. You cannot just give her an antidepressant. So we know that that doesn't work. Socially, what's going on? That's where the trauma is. How do we get her to be able to comfortably, safely move out of her apartment? How do we do that? How do we give her the support online or support with other people that she can feel belonging and safe and secure? So there are many elements that one needs to include in a history take before you just medicate or make an assumption about who the person is that sits in front of you.
Can I pause us there for a minute and we'll come back to the next one?